Kingdom people, they didn't realize who you were. They didn't realize who you were. And so, kingdom people, I was having a conversation with a friend last night. She said something that caused me to start speaking on certain experiences that I had. And it was around pushing. And I had just spoke about a previous relationship and how, that was bad. And I made the point to say that person was controlling. And then I went on to speak about a situation after that. And I said, now, at first that situation seemed to be good, seemed to be a better situation until it wasn't. And I said, found out or realized that that person was worse. Reason being is because this person was more underhanded and sneaky, so it was more disguised. And this person didn't start off this way per se, but they became very wicked and evil towards me in particular. And so she asked me a question. She said, have you spoke to them lately? And I just kind of said, oh my goodness, no, I don't talk to them. And in talking to her, I kind of mentioned how, in that situation, how God was directing me and he was giving me things that he wanted to do in us. I'm going to say in me, but really in us. And it wasn't a situation where I wasn't supposed to be with this person. I knew initially I was. But what was happening is, it's like as time went on, they would oppose me. And it wasn't like we were on the same team. And so one day this person said to me, I was speaking something to them. And I was speaking with authority. And not trying to, but that's just how it was. And the reason why I knew, what made me realize that I was speaking with authority, is because this person said, who do you think you are? And in that moment, I realized they didn't realize who I was and what I was there, why I was with them, why we were together. Now, what I was saying to them was trying to get them to see something, get them to understand something. And I often did this with this person, would try to get through to them on things that I knew and understood because I was aware, I was a little more spiritually advanced, and God would tell me things and show me things. And I was trying to get this person in alignment with what I knew God was trying to do with us. And a lot of it was spiritual first, which would lead to, more promises, more blessings and things of that sort, And I would share certain things with this person as far as what was on my spirit to ultimately do to some extent. And again, I realized in that moment when this person said, who do you think you are? I realized they didn't get who I was and what I was there for, what the whole thing was all about, along with other things that were said. That, sometimes I would just be like, this person would say something, and I would just realize they didn't get it. And it also showed me where their heart was towards me. And, it was an accumulation of those kind of things. Now, sometimes I would try to make them get it. And many a times I didn't do it in a proper way. I would be going off and snapping because I would be frustrated. And sometimes I even got physical, which is not okay. And at some point I was like, okay, this is not good. And I just kind of took steps to remove myself from the situation because it had gotten bad in that way. And again, I realized this person just don't get it. And even with me stepping away, moving on from them, I was still dealing with them, hoping that they would get it, still trying to get them to get it. And it was like, it got worse. It went from bad to worse. It was a lot of mind games. It was just, then it became where I was aware that there was full-on wickedness going on, black magic and all that dark arts being done. And so that was that. I mentioned all this to say how I told the friend of mine how, in that moment when they said, who do you think you are, that I realized they don't know who I am. I knew who I was to the extent that I did at the time. That's why I was able to speak in the authority that I did. And that's what made them say, who do you think you are? Again, I was trying to make them get it. And it reminded me, after I talked to her, it reminded me of how Jesus spoke with authority. And that's how they were with Jesus, the religious leaders and the Pharisees and them. Their attitude was, who do you think you are? Because he spoke with such authority. But he knew who he was. He knew what he came for. And so did I, to the extent that I did at the time. So anyhow, moving on. I'm reading in Acts today. And I was reading the part where they asked Stephen, because they were trying to accuse him of blaspheming God and Moses, because they didn't like how he was so gifted and he spoke with authority and he knew what he was talking about. And they didn't like that, so they made up lies about him and said he was blasphemed. They convinced others to go along with them and making up lies. And that made me think of how people recruit people to come against you, which I often think is weird. Like, ain't nobody getting ready to recruit me to come against somebody just because anyway. But when people do that and they go along with it, it's because they're on that anyway. They're with it. So anyhow, as I'm reading, and Stephen went into speaking about the story of Moses and how Moses left his country and was sent to Egypt because he had, he was raised in Egypt, first of all, because his mom had to give him up. He was raised with Pharaoh's daughter as her son in Egypt. Anyhow, situation happened a little later where he was trying to talk to some guys, which were his fellow Israelites, about not fighting. They was arguing and into it. He was trying to, diffuse the situation. And they were like, who do you think you are? And when I read that, it made me remember how and I was just talking about it the night before, how he said, who do you think you are? Going on, Stephen even mentioned this, but Moses ended up being the one that actually lead the children of Israel out of Egypt into the promised land. Well, them ones didn't make it in, but their descendants did. Anyhow, when I read that, it tripped me out. And God said to me in that moment, they didn't know who you were. Just like they didn't realize who Moses was. In fact, the scripture said, what Stephen said, that and spoke about how Moses said, oh, they don't know I'm here to help free them. So when the man said to Moses, well, who do you think you are? He didn't even realize, Moses didn't even realize it at the time, in all honesty, that Moses was going to be the one to lead them out of Egypt into the promised land, lead them to their freedom. So when I read that and God gave me that revelation, he reminded me how that's what God was doing with me, with this person that I was speaking about that said, who do you think you are? In fact, when I was talking to my friend last night, this was actually last night, she said, I mentioned to her how God was doing something with us. God was showing me what he wanted to do, wanted to raise us up. And I knew that God was leading me into wealth. And I'm going to say us, because that's what God was showing me. And I said to my friend, I said, I was trying to take him with me. I said I was trying to do it with him. That's what I said. I was trying to do it with him because that's what God was showing me at the time. Of course, like I said, the devil had really just turned him out pretty much. The devil had him bad. And so much so that I just couldn't do it. He wasn't getting it. He was getting worse. He was becoming more and more of an enemy, opposing me, trying to just do some horrible things towards me. And I'm not saying it like I was perfect, but one thing I can say, I was never trying to be nobody his enemy. I was trying to help the man get it. May not win about it right all the time, but those are things, I had to learn from. But I was trying to do it with him. I was trying to lead him into the promised land. I knew God was leading me into the promised land. I knew God wanted to lead us into the promised land. Well, that didn't happen. I'm going into my promised land. I'm in my promised land in the beginning stages of it, but in my promised land nonetheless. So I had to leave him behind. And I had to leave him behind because he didn't get it. And then him not getting it, along with him letting the devil get him instead. You have to just take your hands off and just fall back and just go ahead on about your business. And that's what I did. Now, what God said to me is, people tend to not know who his people are. People tend to not know that God sends his people to help bring them out of Egypt, to help set them free, to help lead them into their promised land. Ultimately, kingdom people, God uses you to be a blessing to people in whatever capacity that is. Either way, whatever it is, it's some form of freedom. It's some form of helping them get into their promised land. Many a times, even as you're entering into your promised land, because you can help people along your way. You can. And especially when God is guiding you and God leading you to do so. And so what happens is a lot of people just don't get it. They don't get who you are. They don't know who you are. And so they mishandle you. Although I think regardless of who people are, you should never mishandle people. But what happens is people get besides themselves. They get arrogant. They be full of pride and ego, and think that you shouldn't be speaking with such authority. You shouldn't be thinking so high of yourself. And what it is you know who you are. You know you're being led by God. You know you're trying to instruct people in a way that God is leading you. And I hesitated right there because right when I said that, instruct people in the way, I've learned to not instruct people anymore. God had to redirect me, not from that situation, because he used me in other situations. But in my experience, not always, but in my experience, when God bring you in and try to use you to lead and guide people, they always have turned on me or taken me for granted. What I can say for certain is that the devil take over them. I can say that for certain. And so God had to position me in a way where he don't move me in that way per se anymore. Not saying he won't or he haven't. Let me just say he haven't for a little while now. Partly is because he had me focus on myself. Not that I don't deal with people and collaborate with people, but it's totally different. I mean, I come here and I speak here and I do other things where I'm, sharing valuable information and ministering and, speaking what God leads me to speak or writing or whatever the case may be. But I haven't been doing it in that way. But as I said, I've learned that what happens is they don't get who you are. They don't get it. Or sometimes they do to some extent, but they resent you and become jealous and begin to oppose you and ultimately try to tear you down, break you. Y'all have heard this before many a times because they realize you possess something that they don't have. Them not understanding you're there to literally build them up, build up in them what they need. But instead of just taking it on, and of course the enemy gets in there because the enemy is he's a divider. He likes to cause confusion. Even when God used you to help someone in that way, the devil knows there are open doors. So if they allow the enemy to have them, instead of just being in the space of learning and recognizing it for what it is, they let the devil in because they get bothered, and resentful that you're the one. But you're the one sent to help them. And it's like how they say, they pretty much bite the hand that feeds them. Even if they're doing something that helps you, God sent you to help them on a whole nother level. Okay? And so, yeah. And I can remember in the beginning, God brought all this to my remembrance, how in the beginning when I was dealing with this particular person, how they said, I was on the phone with them, and they said, I was like, what are you doing? Because it sounded like they was just real busy doing something. He was kind of breathing a little heavy. And he said, oh, I'm looking, I'm searching. I said, what are you searching for? He said, God keep telling me I have a treasure, and it's right in your face, that he sent me a treasure, and it's right in your face. And when he said it, no, he said it's right in front of you. And when he said that, God said to me, you're the treasure, telling me that he was talking about me. I knew that. I never said that to this person. I never expressed it. But eventually I recognized they didn't recognize that. They didn't recognize who I was. And again, where they did, they resented me for it. They couldn't receive the blessing. They couldn't just take it for what it was. They had to oppose and come against. And I'm just hearing how the one who was rejected is now the cornerstone. That's precisely what happens. You be the cornerstone. You was the cornerstone then, but they rejected you. They came against you. They didn't realize who you were. They did to some extent, which is why they came against you. But they didn't really, really, really get it. They didn't really get it. And so, kingdom people, they didn't understand who you were. But now they're understanding. Unfortunately, now it's too late. And many of these people have done way too much to where there's no coming back from it. Many of these people have literally tried to take you out. And this just is what it is. And so you can't, it's nothing there. Now they have to go straight to God or do the work completely with God. You were there to be that bridge, to be that intercessor, but they weren't receptive to it. And so God had to remove you. Like he said, if they don't receive you, shake off the dust and keep going. And that's what you eventually had to do. They didn't realize who you were then, but now they realize it, and it's too late.